Our guest tonight was one of the most feared narcotics officers in America. Barry Cooper didn't just enforce the war on drugs, he dominated it. Trained by the DEA, the FBI, and U.S. military task forces, Barry racked up hundreds of drug arrests, seized millions in assets, and led elite canine units on high-profile busts across Texas. But then he flipped, not just against the system, but against everything he once stood for. Today, Barry Cooper is public enemy number one, not to drug dealers, but to dirty cops and prosecutors. He teaches people how to pass drug tests, how to outsmart police interrogations, and how to walk away from a drug arrest with their freedom intact. He's trained lawyers, freed inmates, and even faked a drug grow operation on national TV just to expose corrupt cops. Law enforcement calls him a traitor, the sister calls him dangerous, and to a whole lot of Americans, he's a hero. Now his story is being told in a raw, new 5-part docuseries that just premiered at Sundance called Never Get Busted. Before we bring Barry on, let's watch the trailer.
All right, let's begin. My name is Barry Cooper.
Barry Cooper.
Barry Cooper, one of the best narcotics officers in the country.
The Barry Cooper story, what's a big one?
Barry was your worst nightmare.
Barry Cooper could piss an entire nation off with the wave of his hand.
Who has the power to pull a gun on you, shoot you, and probably get away with it? It's a police officer.
This is the money that we seized.
The only way for Barry to repent for these sins was to say, I was the villain, now I need to be the hero.
Can you imagine a DVD that teaches criminals how to break the law?
Now the former straight-laced lawman is using his expertise to show drug users how to conceal their stash.
It's all in an outrageous DVD that he's produced called Never Get Busted Again.
He was one of the first people to make a huge public stand.
Oh, I thought he was crazy. You know, I thought he was gonna get shot down.
So why in the world would you, as a former drug enforcement officer, want to help people use drugs?
He's developed into this much more dangerous enemy of law enforcement.
We must end this war on our people.
That offended almost all law enforcement officers, and he became a target.
Hey, Rangers, why are y'all being pricks like that? You don't want me busting crooked cops?
We get into some real cloak and dagger, Breaking Bad, Ozark shit.
Barry Cooper himself is still at large.
Barry broke the code. People wanted him dead.
I was considered one of the worst traitors on the planet to law enforcement. And my response to them was, F you, come get some.
Barry, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
That's a surprisingly wonderful moment for me.
Oh, well, thank you.
I've been a fan of yours for a while, Kim.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, let's just dive right into this. Tell us, first of all, how did you go from busting people for drugs to helping them not get busted, helping them get away with using drugs, essentially, at this point? I mean, is that what you've been doing, helping people get away with using drugs and dealing drugs?
Well, so people are already using the drugs, right? I'm just helping them not get busted for using the drugs. Put it that way. I don't want to see anybody go to a cage because they're smoking a joint or even doing a line of cocaine on the weekends. You know, we filled up our jails over the decades in this war on drugs. It hasn't worked. It's failed. And I'm still here trying to explain to everybody why we need to end the drug war.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start off with your background. So tell us about what was it that happened? What caused you to have a big change of heart?
The biggest thing that caused me to have a change of heart in the drug war, I think, was smoking cannabis. I think smoking the cannabis. That, and when I was raiding homes, I kind of woke up in the middle of life and I saw what I was doing, that these families were not gangsters. We were smashing their doors in, throwing in flash flashbang grenades, screwing pistols in moms and dads' ears, screaming, all the chaos, wrecking families. And I woke up in the middle of that and thought, what am I doing? These people aren't criminals. And then I started smoking a little of the weed myself and had a big, so that's something about psychedelics. Cannabis is a psychedelic. It helps us see what's going on inside of us instead of the rewards outside. It helps us work on us. And it just got my conscience. I realized what I was doing wasn't the right way.
When did you, so you just decided at one point, like, how did you end up smoking some cannabis? Did you just like, somebody offered you a joint or hit from a bong? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I started smoking weed because the woman I fell in love with to become my wife was a weed dealer. She was a weed dealer.
How did that happen? How did that happen? Did you meet her because you were investigating her?
No. In fact, she was in my church. She was a member of my church. I pastored a church and I was married. And I even performed the ceremony of her and her husband in church to get married. Then years later, after I had already quit law enforcement and I had already quit being a preacher, I met her and she was divorced and I was divorced. And we fell in love, and I noticed people coming over to her house all the time, and I wasn't stupid. She was a weed dealer. So she talked me into smoking weed and eating pizza all day in bed. And I just sort of had a transformation from there. I think I smoked every day for 4 or 5 years after that. Helped me put down the alcohol, and I was just smoking weed. And when I would smoke the weed, I would digress into the horrible things I had done, and all this world view that I had just shattered, that this drug war was not the way to go, that it was the wrong. In fact, it was immoral for me to put people in a cage for possession of a little bit of something.
Yeah, I want to get to that. But you said that you had already left drug enforcement. Why did you leave drug enforcement? I mean, you were one of the top guys in the country, busting all of these people. Why did you leave?
I left drug enforcement, and it broke my heart when I left drug enforcement, but I was sort of pushed out because I had received a lot of training, as you can tell by the introduction. And I took that training back to a small town where they hired me as head of narcotics, Gladewater Police Department. And I arrested the mayor's son for methamphetamine. I arrested a sitting city councilman for cannabis and a pistol. I did too good. I was doing too good. So they took me off of head of narcotics, put me on days where they could keep an eye on me. And I could tell the grace was kind of lifting off of what I should be doing anyway. So I just transformed from that into an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I quit law enforcement and started to open up small startups.
And at that point, when you had left law enforcement, had you had that moment, that awakening of, wow, what I did was immoral?
Yeah, so it was a process. I realized what I was doing was immoral in the middle of these raids, these house raids that I was telling you about. It's like I would wake up in the middle of those raids and say, what am I doing? And then, so I'm raiding these houses, already feeling that this is immoral. And then I start busting the wrong people, the city councilman and the mayor's son, and they start edging me out of law enforcement. So I edge out of law enforcement already feeling like it was immoral. Then I met my weed dealer wife, helped me smoke the weed, which opened my eyes. Oh my God, what you're doing is immoral. Do something about it.
Okay.
Try to fix what.
Okay.
I did some slimy things to humanity, believing the propaganda. They told me that people who have cannabis were evil. I thought I was doing a heroic thing. I know that sounds insane, but that was pre-internet. I didn't have anything else to go by except what they had taught me. And when I say they, my parents, the school teachers, spiritual counselors, pastors, everybody, people who do cannabis are evil. So I thought I was doing something heroic. And then I all of a sudden wake up in the middle of what I was doing and already did and thought, this can't be right. It was such a twist. And of course, smoking weed the whole time to help me sort that out. And here we are. You know, I had to flee the U.S. because of my work.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I definitely want to hear about how you've been helping people not get busted. But tell us about the times that when you were busting people. Were most of them for weed?
Back when I was working drug enforcement, yeah, the cannabis arrests were the most. Now I would say the cases I help with are methamphetamine. More methamphetamine addicts now, but back then it was mostly cannabis users.
Mm-hmm. And what sort of punishment did they get for cannabis?
Well, the punishment range was anywhere from a ticket, like a citation, all the way up to, back then you could serve life in prison if we caught you with more than 1,000 pounds of cannabis. You could do life in prison.
Jeez.
Now, I never made a life case. I never filed a life case on somebody for cannabis, but I'm sure, you know, it just even hurts to even think that the amount of time somebody may have done 10 years back then for catching them with a pound of weed.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the raids and dirty cops. Tell us about what were some of the tactics that cops did to make these arrests against people who otherwise wouldn't have deserved it?
Yeah, so some tactics that cops used that they kept really quiet among the public would be the way they planted drugs on people.
Planted drugs on people?
Yeah. So you all know the old way, cliche way of planting drugs on somebody, right? I'm a cop. I take it out of my pocket and I put it in somebody else's pocket.
Right, sure.
But that was too easy to be caught. So we would do what's called an informant plant. If there was somebody dealing drugs and there's no way we could catch them, we would lie and say that an informant told us they saw drugs in the person's house, and we would raid the house based on what that confidential informant told us, knowing that we didn't have to ever give up the ID of our confidential informant. So we lied and made up. It's called a ghost informant. Mm-hmm. We made it up. We used that to get into houses. Now you say that's for people who otherwise don't deserve it. If you believe people belong in prison for drugs, then they deserved it. Mm-hmm. If you believe they didn't belong in prison for drugs, then they didn't deserve it. And what we were doing was not only immoral, but illegal.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, when I think of planting drugs, I'm thinking of, somebody who didn't have any drugs in their house, or they had very little and you added to it in order to really bust them. Did that ever happen?
No, I don't remember ever setting somebody up that wasn't a drug dealer. In other words, that's what they did with Yolanda. That's how I got Yolanda out of prison. Her hands were clean, and they did an informant plant, what I just described, on Yolanda and put her in prison. That's why I went to Odessa, set up that trap house, stung the cops, and got her out of prison.
So tell us about Yolanda.
So Yolanda's just probably one of the sweetest humans you'd ever meet, her and her father. She was called by her son's friend, said, "Hey, come over and pick up your son's Game Boy bag." So she got in the truck, drove over there to pick up her son's Game Boy bag. She got the Game Boy bag in the car, drives away. The police pull her over. It turns out there's an ounce of methamphetamine in that Game Boy bag that she didn't know anything about. It was an informant plant, what I just described. And they sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison. She'd already done 4 years when her father contacted me and said, "Look, my daughter's in prison. Dude, I don't know what to do to get her out." But they planted drugs on her. So I looked at the evidence and one thing led to another. And that's when I decided to sting those cops to bring attention to her case to get her out of prison.
Wow. So why did they do that to her? What was their reason? Why her?
They said they planted the drugs on the wrong person.
Why were they planting drugs on anybody?
I like what Raymond Madden said in the documentary, like, how do you plant drugs on the right person?
Right.
They had got a tip that she was the queen of methamphetamine in Odessa. It was rumored. It was just pure rumor. And then they got the informant who was willing to set her up by making her think she was picking up her son's Game Boy bag instead of Game Boy bag plus an ounce of methamphetamine.
Mm-hmm.
She lost 4 years of her life because of that dirty trick.
How were you able to prove that she wasn't this queen of meth and that they weren't, and that they planted it on the wrong person? Or that they planted it at all and she didn't belong there?
Okay, we were never able to prove the cops planted the drugs on her. That's not why she got out of prison. She got out of prison because of some technical thing. We caught a cop doing something strange with a signature. It was one of those weird things like, really? That's the thing that got her out of prison?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the truth is they were looking for a reason to get her out of prison because they realized once I took all the discovery, the evidence, and I put it online and said, look, here's what the cops used to convict her. Once we did that, the public could see exactly what the judge saw. And there was no way anybody would have sentenced her to jail for that. So they had to figure out some little legal way to let her out.
Tell us about some of the people from when you were the drug bust cop. Tell us about some of the people that when you look back, you really regret. You really regret that experience and putting them away or raiding their home.
I regret so much because it's mainly like I could sit here as you're asking that question and eyes can appear before me, like flashback of eyes when I told somebody they're going to jail. And when they realized that they were being handcuffed, the look in their eyes many, 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 many times. So there wouldn't be just one specific moment, although there was one specific moment that they covered in the documentary, and that was when I raided a house with a mother and a father. The father was in the oil field. I think the mother was a hairdresser, which my mother used to be a hairdresser, and it was over a bag of pot, and they had little kids that were about the same age as my kids, and the mom's on the ground, handcuffed behind her back. Kids are screaming and the cops are telling the kids everything's going to be okay. And I'm thinking, what if these were my kids? And the parents had a balanced bank account. Their house was clean. Their kids were well cared for. Obviously, people who didn't need to be raided and treated like that. So that particular raid woke me up, but mostly the flashbacks from seeing everybody's eyes, that sheer terror in their eyes when they realize they're going to jail and there's nothing they can do about it. That's haunting.
Tell us why you think the war on drugs, there's going to be people that say, Barry, no, we've got to crack down on all these drug users and drug dealers. They're degenerates to society. Marijuana, yeah, okay, I get it. A lot of people smoke pot now, and a lot of people, in a lot of places it's legal, but it's a gateway drug, and it's led to people being, addicted to all kinds of other drugs. Other drugs are very damaging and deadly. People that do meth get addicted, and they can die. There's a real crisis here, and we have to actually tackle it. And the way we do it is by busting the drug dealers. So you're helping get rid of this problem, which is maybe if we just busted enough of them, they would stop dealing drugs. That's the logic, right? So what do you say to that sort of pushback?
Well, they're right about drugs causing problems to the fabric of society, but so does alcohol. In fact, alcohol causes more deaths and is responsible for more violent crime than all the drugs put together. You can take heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, put them all together and compare it to the problems alcohol causes, and it's not even a contest. So if we're not doing that with alcohol, why are we doing it with these substances? Now, I've got a different approach that I don't think anybody's heard yet, that I think what we should do is prohibit these substances like fentanyl, right? And even methamphetamine, two of the worst drugs. I hate to see what those drugs do to the fabric of society. It degenerates society, period. People die on it. So what do? Go arrest the people buying it? No. We have the technology, Kim, to completely stop the flow of fentanyl and methamphetamine. We can leave these other drug markets open. We can decriminalize those other drugs like the psychedelics, where people, and maybe a little cocaine, where people can have some fun on the weekends. But we have the technology to stop fentanyl from getting in the United States. We have that technology. The reason they're not stopping it is because, you're going to call me a conspiracy theorist, but it's true. The cartels are not the end game. The cartels work for the billionaire elitists who own this world. The billionaires who own this world are in the drug markets, and they're allowing the cartels to import X amount of cocaine, X amount of fentanyl, as long as the cartels are paying their tax to the billionaires. The billionaires are getting loads and loads, billions and billions of dollars every year from the drug market, so they don't want to stop it. Now, I have seen, and Trump knows this, Donald Trump knows this, that's why he's putting pressure, he's putting political pressure and trade pressure on China to stop the flow of fentanyl. And you watch, it's going to stop. They're not going to have it. Prohibition of certain substances does work. When they say prohibition doesn't work, real prohibition does work. I was in Mexico, and where I lived in Mexico, you couldn't buy opiates. The cartels wouldn't allow it. You're like, what do you mean? Nope, the cartels would not sell opiates to their population. And if you were caught selling opiates, it was the death penalty. They'd kill you.
Wow.
So you couldn't get opiates. And I'd ask the cartels, well, you're selling me this methamphetamine. How come I can't have the opiates? Said opiates make society too sick. So where I lived in Puerto Vallarta, because of true prohibition, there was not one fentanyl drug addict. Not one. Why? Because it was properly prohibited. So we can properly prohibit, we can properly stop the supply of certain drugs into society and allow others to come in that aren't as wreckful on the soul as, say, the methamphetamine or the fentanyl are. We can stop it. The people who own us, the people who, we're the working class, the people we work for can stop this. They can. It's just a matter of, when. How are we able to give them the same amount of money that they're addicted to now through legalization? And that's going to take a switch. They don't care whether it's legal or illegal. They just want their share of the money. Well, an example of that is like cannabis legalization. Used to, the billionaires, all they made was the black market money from the sale of cannabis. Well, now they're getting the taxes from cannabis. And it seems to be working and sort of seems to not be working. I don't think it's working well enough for the billionaires to decriminalize these other substances. Like under my plan, how we should use technology to stop those other substances, what I just explained. I don't think they're ready to do that yet, because it will temporarily stop the flow of billions of dollars that's flowing in a certain direction. And I've learned through, Kim, I went back to college during COVID to get my master's in international relations. And it woke me up to, like, why don't they just legalize it? Why don't they just legalize cannabis? Well, it's all about the money flow. If you stop billions of dollars from flowing in a certain way in society, you just cut it off, you create a trickle-down effect on economies everywhere. So they understand why they're keeping the drugs illegal, and they could care less whether it's legal or illegal. It's just switching over to the new system without stopping that flow of the billions of dollars. And nobody wants to do it. Somebody's going to have to come up to the front of the plate and say, okay, wait a minute. We've got to stop this, and it's going to hurt for a minute. It's going to hurt for a minute. But at the end of the game, the billionaires can still make their billions of dollars through legal drug sales. The cartels can still make their money. And they can do all of this without putting millions of us working class people in cages.
Yeah.
They can do it.
So which drugs would you prohibit completely?
I would prohibit fentanyl. Like fentanyl would be completely prohibited. And you say, well, what do you mean prohibited? Use the technology to stop the flow. Whatever Mexicans and Chinese people are bringing that in those loads. They can see those loads from the sky. They know the drug markets and the flows. They can see all that. They know every bit of, they know where the large loads are on this planet, period. You can't hide it. They have the technology for that now.
So fentanyl,
if they want to try, Kim, so they want to try prohibition by telling slave class, me, you're going to go to prison for a long time if you use that drug. How about just don't offer that drug to me?
Yeah.
How about don't offer that drug to me? Because I'll take it. COVID woke us up. I used to say that it's not that drugs are so good. It's not that drugs, I used to say, it's not that drugs are so bad, it's that drugs are so good. I said this years ago, saying that because back then, that was before we had fentanyl and the meth scourge. We didn't have fentanyl. And I used to say, there's nobody that would say, hey, come here, try this drug. 4 people died from it last night and be able to sell that drug. I used to say there's no way that drug would sell, which is why cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, which doesn't really kill a lot of people, the pure heroin, why those things are legal is because people like them and they're not killing anybody. So I used to deduct by logical thinking that, okay, so people won't do a drug. It's kind of self-checking, self-prohibition. Until the fentanyl came, I couldn't believe seeing the number, 100,000 people dying every year from fentanyl. That means there's a drug dealer going, hey, come over here, try this fentanyl. 300 people a day are dying on it, and they're still taking it. So the humans of society, we're not able to say no. I really believe that. A certain group of society is not able to say no. So what do? You remove that from their choice power where they don't have a choice. Because if they have a choice, they're going to choose to get the fentanyl. So don't give them the choice. There was a day you couldn't buy fentanyl in the United States. You remember that? If you went to the street and said, I want fentanyl, they go, what is that? So that's proof we can keep it out of the country. That's proof. Just 10 years ago, we didn't have fentanyl. Now we have fentanyl.
Yeah.
That means we can stop the flow. And I have to press this. We can stop the flow without jailing hundreds of thousands of Americans, mostly addicts. There's another way to end this drug war, and they know it. They know it. They know it. They know they can do this. I wrote a book about it. I'm going to release that book when this documentary hits. It takes less than an hour to read, but it will explain in a very easy format how we can actually end this drug war and not touch the billions of dollars that the billionaires have become addicted to the last 40, 50 years from the drug trade.
So it'd be like a win for everybody, except for maybe those who manufacture the drugs?
Has to be a win for everybody. Right now, it's not a win for us, for society. We're catching the brunt of it by constantly going to jail. That's the part that needs to end, and we can end that under that plan I just explained, and that's using technology to stop the flow of certain drugs into society.
So do you think that no drug dealers and no drug users should be in jail?
I don't think anybody should be in jail unless they actually harmed another person. Now, so that's what we talk about. And these are arguments that the prohibitionists didn't have that I'm bringing to the plate now, because if you're selling $1 billion worth of drugs in society, you are harming society, and not the way you think. Not because the cocaine's bad and it caused somebody to go rob a bank type, but because of untaxed dollars. It's a leak in the till. It's a leak in the till of society. That's why the president of the Philippines, where I lived for 6 years, and I got there right at the end of his, a lot of people call it the reign of terror. He killed several thousand Filipino citizens in the drug war. Like, just an open order for cops to start shooting drug addicts and people selling drugs. Well, a lot of people are like, what are you doing? Well, it's because there was a leak in the till. There were billions of dollars being sucked out of the Filipino economy, and it was going to the Mexicans and it was going to China, where it was breaking the till. It was breaking, at the end of the night, a till, a cash register, that when you check out, you pull that tray, you count the money, and it better be what the cash register says it is. So it's a matchup. Well, at the end of the night, the till didn't have half the money that's supposed to be there because it leaked out of the economy unchecked. So the answer is, if you are selling massive amount of drugs, you are causing an economic hardship on other people. Therefore, it could be said you probably belong in jail.
But in what way? In what way are they? Like, explain how the money is draining. Like, is it because the people aren't as productive because they're doing drugs? Is it because the money when they buy the drugs is going somewhere else? Like, what do you mean by that?
It's the sheer. Yeah, it's the sheer. At the end of the day, the Filipinos need to count how much money is in the till. And at the end of the day, half of it's going to China and Mexico, and it's not being taxed.
Okay.
It's not being taxed. We're talking about millions and billions of dollars. It's like opening up a store for business, and somebody in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day, as the cash register is going, ching, 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 they take out half the money from the till. That company's going to suffer. That company's going to suffer. Well, these countries are companies. Like Donald Trump's running it like a company right now. He sees that. He understands that. So big time drug dealers that have already been warned, if you smuggle a ton of fentanyl into the United States and we catch you, you're going to go to prison. I could see how it would be moral to put that person in jail, because they are causing harm on society by bleeding the till.
But the little guys, the guys that are buying the drugs or the guys that are doing small amounts of dealing, you don't think you don't think they belong in jail?
Hands off to us. We're too stupid. We're going to take your fentanyl. Life's so hard out here. The American culture is one of the greatest countries in the world, but it's a grind. And it's so hard out here, we can't just say no. We can't say no. We're not going to say no. We need help saying no. And we have the technology now to do it. We have the technology to stop any packets of fentanyl from coming into the United States any longer.
But before fentanyl, we still had drug problems with people doing too many drugs and being a waste on society and out of their minds and dangerous. And I remember bath salts. I don't even know. Is that a form of meth? Bath salts. Do you remember bath salts? Where people were like eating the faces of other people?
I took a lot of bath salts, and all a bath salt is a lookalike. So cocaine's illegal. So the Chinese learned to make something that acted just like cocaine on the body.
Okay.
Speed you up, licking the teeth, but it wouldn't test cocaine in the drug labs. So it was illegal cocaine. And they called it a bath salt. They sold it as a bath salt to sprinkle in the bath and not for human consumption. So a bath salt can be any look-alike drug, that a drug that's looks alike or mimics an illegal drug.
Okay.
So you hear the people on bath salts, it ate a person's face off from eating the bath salts. Okay, let's talk about those people, and I'm glad you mentioned the violent people. Like these drugs and the violent people, and some of those need to be put in jail. Put them in jail for the violence. Put them in jail for the violence. Because this city I told you about where you couldn't find one heroin addict, Puerto Vallarta, you know what else you couldn't find in that city? Crime. We're talking about a city that the cartels sold drugs on the certain corners to the public on a daily basis. They controlled the drug markets, and there were no heroin addicts, and there wasn't any violent crime. Why? Because they were serious about enforcing violent crime laws. If you punch somebody or rob somebody or murdered somebody or burglarized a house, then they caught you, beat the shit out of you, and put you away in a Mexican prison for people, so people wouldn't do that. Like, if a tourist would fall in Mexico, the Mexicans would run over there and help pick up the tourist, because that was another law that if you harm a tourist, it's a death penalty for you. Because if you start harming tourists, get it out in the paper that in Mexico tourists are harmed and you hurt their economy.
Yeah.
So it's whatever's enforced. So we need to enforce violent crime. I love the new FBI now. I love what Bongino and Patel are doing in the sense that they're going after violent crime again. Like, we need zero tolerance on violent crime. Zero. These what we see in some of these blue cities, that these mobs of people are running into stores stealing like that. Shoot those people. Stop that shit. Stop that.
Okay.
Don't put up with that kind of stuff. So now if you've got a person doing drugs that's committing a violent crime, we're putting them in jail for the right reason, for the violent crime, not the drug.
Right. Okay. So, and right now, are we still putting in more people in jail for doing drugs versus dealing drugs?
100% more people are going to jail for doing drugs than dealing drugs. It's added. Like 99% of my cases that I have now are methamphetamine addicts who got busted with a dirty pipe or under a gram, just over and over and over and over and over, arresting the addicts. They're not catching the big loads. They didn't start catching the big loads until Trump. If you look at all the news articles, when Trump came aboard and he announced this new policy that y'all can't bring fentanyl in, you started seeing huge bust. I even predicted it. I said there's going to be big bust coming, and there were. Tons of cocaine seizures. I mean, many more cocaine seizures that equaled a ton or more, like 100 tons. So since Donald Trump got into office, and he's trying to stop that large flow that we're talking about, they get busted. How do they get busted so easily? How do they get busted under one president but not on the other? It's because they know those loads are coming across the border. They know every kilo of cocaine that crosses the border into the United States, the billionaires who own the planet know about that kilo, and they're getting paid off that kilo.
Okay, so tell us about your transition into helping people evade the police. What kind of advice do you give? I mean, do you really give people advice on how to do drugs, which would be illegal, right? Or sell drugs, which would be at this point illegal, whether it should be or shouldn't be. That's a very good debate to have. But at this point, a lot of them are. So how do you help people evade that and without you yourself going to jail?
Right. That's a good question. One of my favorite tips is never carry more than you can eat. Like that tip will save lives. If people lived by that one tip alone, would save hundreds of thousands, millions of lives. Never carry more than you can eat. And what that means, like if having a joint is illegal, or having a tab of MDMA is illegal in your town, and they're going to completely destroy your family and your life if you're caught with that. Then never carry more than you can eat. Have your little stash next to a glass of water when you're driving down the highway.
And then literally eat it.
If the police pull you over, eat it and start swallowing. It's not illegal to like smell like drugs. It's just illegal to possess it. And if you eat it, there's no way they can get it out of your stomach. And there's no way to get busted. So that's one of my favorite tips.
Okay. All right. What about somebody who's dealing drugs? I think there's more of I would say, a societal pushback on the dealers than the users. I think a lot of people could go along with, yeah, we don't need to be locking up the users. But the dealers, that's a different story, especially meth. I mean, meth, you don't think that meth should be illegal? That one really messes people up.
Yeah, I'm stuck on the methamphetamine one, I tell you. One, that's a drug that I became addicted to, so I know that drug very well. It's also a drug that I've helped hundreds, maybe 1,000 people stop. So I know that drug really well, and it's my least favorite. Fentanyl and methamphetamine are the two I wish we could just evaporate from Earth.
Yeah.
But the truth is that a society that is allowed to make their own choices, as long as it's not fentanyl, will work itself out. Because I'm still stuck, Kim, because let me just go on a thought mission with you. We've been told over and over and over that prohibition doesn't work. That the prohibitionists like me have preached prohibition doesn't work. But I know prohibition does, because I've lived in countries, right? But I also want freedom for people. People should have the freedom, but I also see when we give them freedom, 100,000 a year will die. So I'm not 100% sure my solutions will work. I know they're very controversial. But I know what we're doing now doesn't work. What we're doing now is causing more harm than the drugs.
Yeah.
What we're doing now, the way we're enforcing the drug laws, is causing more harm than the drug itself.
Yeah, I mean, just a good argument to make with that is we've been doing this drug war forever. I mean, since I was born, I feel like we've been doing this drug war and going after drug users and drug dealers, and here we are today in society, and we have fentanyl. And so clearly, we only got worse. We didn't get any better. Things didn't get any better. Things have only gotten worse because fentanyl is worse than anything we've ever had. And that's now running rampant all over the streets. So what we've done has not only not helped, but somehow we've worsened. So how is that possible, and why do we keep continuing to do the same thing?
Exactly. You said it perfectly. We're in a kind of a loopish nightmare, a nightmarish loop that obviously is not going to change until they allow a change. Yeah, I feel like you. I feel the same way, and I feel a little conflicted because it used to be an easy argument. It used to be for me, make all drugs legal. But we can't. We learned we can't do that with fentanyl. Look what it did.
Right.
Look what it did. So we've got to somehow. I wanted to just skip the fentanyl part because my arguments were much easier before fentanyl. Just legalize everything.
Yeah.
So I had to really sit down and do some deep thought. And what do we do? You're right. Fentanyl needs to be illegal. It needs to be completely prohibited. Whether methamphetamine does or not, I'm not sure. But why not?
Yeah, maybe not illegal, but I mean, you don't need to make it illegal if, like you said, if you could completely prohibit it, if you could figure out how to stop the flow entirely, because, like I'm sure 20 years from now, there'll be a different drug that we don't know anything about right now, and it'll be in the market, and it's not in the market today, but it will be in 20 years. So, I mean, but we don't know about it, so we don't know what we're missing, right? We don't feel like our freedom's being taken away from us when we don't have the option of it. because we don't even know about it. I mean, if we just took away the options of fentanyl and meth, then if you could find it and get it, it's not illegal, but you're not going to find it and you're not going to get it.
There, that argument right there. And I have not heard one prohibitionist or one activist explain that part, what you just explained. It was perfect, right? If they can't get it, we're just fine. And that's how it needs to be stopped, making it where we can't get these certain substances.
But I do understand from a freedom perspective, being somebody that is libertarian-esque myself, I do understand where, but there was a time when they did try to prohibit alcohol, and there's people out there that would like to prohibit a lot of other things. And so, this kind of takes us down that slippery slope. If we start with, well, if you can't even find fentanyl, you can't do fentanyl, then, maybe the group says, well, if you can't find, alcohol, then you won't do alcohol. You won't drink alcohol if you can't find alcohol. So we're just going to make sure you can't find it. And so then you get into this mentality of, I'm just going to ban and ensure you can't have access to anything that I think is immoral. And, who's to say that you're the morality police?
Right. You're saying what I'm saying, and I still feel conflicted. Is our argument, are our arguments flawed in some way? We're saying give freedom, but then we're saying take away a person's ability to have something.
Yeah, it is tough. It's certainly tough. And I think it's kind of one of those thought exercises that people have to have all the time. It's sort of like with free speech. People say, well, free speech, except you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, right? Or, yeah, I believe in life and liberty, and that's why I don't allow you to commit suicide. That's against the law also. We won't allow physician-assisted suicide. That takes away your choice to be able to do that. People are definitely, even people who feel that they are staunch libertarians, will still find areas in where they do believe in limiting behavior. So the question is, at what point, because certainly we all have, and I guess it comes down to, you just can't harm another person. Like, nobody, I think, would be so libertarian. I mean, I'm sure there's these weirdos out there, but nobody would be so libertarian that they'd say it's okay to kill other people and rape other people too. Because, like, of course, most of us would say absolutely not, because now you've infringed on the liberty and freedom of another person. So I guess the arguments would be, at what point when you start to cause damage and harming, but again, that's subjective. That's where it gets subjective, because then people say, well, I believe it is harmful to do drugs and not provide for your family, even though you're not hurting your family, you're not beating your family, you're not out there committing crime, you're not violent, you're not, there's all these things, but they could say, yeah, but you're still harming your family because you could have been a better provider and, had you not been strung out all the time. But here you are, you're high all the time. And so.
Well, then there's another argument. There's another argument that drugs make you a better parent, that drugs can make you a better person.
Maybe for some, it can chill them out.
Right drugs, you're going to be, I always say that. People say, well, where's the line? What do you do? Well, if you do the right drugs, you're going to be okay. If you do the wrong drugs, you are risking losing your spirit, your soul, your life. You really are. If you do cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin, those three, you're risking big problems. Mm-hmm. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. So if you don't ever do any of those three, you're going to be okay, because the other options are all psychedelics.
Yeah. And so you would say opioids fall into heroin, right? So you would say like.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. Definitely. Yeah. If you as a human, if you to live in 2025 and moving forward, if you'll stay away from heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine, you're going to be okay. Because the other options it leaves you are psychedelics, cannabis, mushrooms, MDMA. Those are all drugs you can go party on and have fun and get that need out, but they're therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And they don't drain your soul. They don't harm the fabric of society. So you can still party, you can still have fun, you can still be a good parent, you can still be a good wife or husband if you use the right drug.
Yeah. Barry, this is so interesting. Tell us, what is it? So now you do consultations and You also have this NGB 400. That is, what is that exactly?
Yeah, so what I've been doing since I quit law enforcement and started Never Get Busted, I've been a criminal defense expert witness. That's where my clients contact me or their lawyers contact me, and they ask me to review the discovery. The discovery is the evidence that they use against you on a drug case. Police reports, videos, canine logs, and I review all of that for holes that can get the client's case dismissed. Before trial, we try to get the case dismissed before trial in what's called a evidence suppression hearing. And that's where we take the case before the judge and say, look, yes, the government seized methamphetamine from my client, but they broke rules along the way when they seized the methamphetamine, so we're going to ask you to dismiss the case. Because those take a lot of time and a lot of focus, there are lots of people who can't afford my fees for me to review their discovery. So I started NGB 400. It's a real activist group. We meet twice a month on Zoom, and we review drug cases, real drug cases. And I've taught the class right now. I've got 12 senior members that have been studying with me and working cases for over 2 years. And I feel confident enough that I can give them a case. They can give me a report, and that report's going to be, I may have to touch it up 1 or 2%, and then it's ready to go to our client's lawyer for our lawyer to look at these different holes. So yeah, the NGB 400 is just another way I developed to try to help, and this might be just a drop in the bucket, one at a time, but it's helping people get out of the grips of a traumatic drug case that they've gotten themselves into because of the war.
So fascinating. I'm sure a lot of people watching, probably themselves or family members, could use your consultation, because it is I think most families I know, most people I know have somebody in their life that has been busted or is being busted or, something along those lines, because it is just so common, especially for, like you said, nowadays it's more meth. And the fentanyl crisis is massive. A lot of people are on drugs. It's tragic in so many ways, but very interesting. I do have the links down below to ngb400.com. Also to check out the 5-part docuseries that just premiered at Sundance. When is that coming out for the rest of us to watch?
Okay, yeah. So the docuseries, it was produced by David Go and Aaron. They bought my life story rights. They took the movie to Chris Smith of Tiger King and John Batzik, another award-winning documentary maker, and they became our executive producers. They've been working on this film for almost 6 years now, and it just premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, and it premiered last week at Dances with Films in Hollywood. So it's on the circuit right now. It's on the, what's it called?
Like the film festival circuit, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
The film festival circuit right now until a streamer buys it, because it's winning awards. That's the idea, right? To win awards, so the price of poker goes up.
Oh,
everybody
I see.
makes more money.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Good insight on that. And then maybe like Netflix will pick it up and you'll be the next Tiger King. And then you'll be running for president.
The Tiger King of the drug war. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, totally. And then you'll be running for president, and you might actually, or office, and you might actually win. You might actually win.
I will not run for president. I ran for Texas Attorney General as part of the reason the cops raided me. And I'm a horrible politician. I am not a good politician. I will not be running for office. I don't know what made me think I could be a good attorney general. I had no idea what I was doing, and that won't happen
I think that's actually what would make you a good politician, is if you just, if you're like, I don't, like, what makes a good politician? Who's the good ones are the gruff ones. The good ones are the ones that are, the good ones are people like you, that are just normal, rather than these polished, people are sick of the polished politicians that are saying all the things that we want to hear and then doing stuff behind our backs. Nobody wants them anymore.
I agree. I just don't think you can get very high in politics without doing some crummy things, and I'm not willing to do those crummy things. Now, there are some politicians I have my eyes on, like Rand Paul and guys like this, and Ron Paul, who I don't think do corrupt things, and they do. They're great politicians, but that's a drop in the bucket. I think most politicians have to do such squirrely things to get to the top. I'm just not willing to do those squirrely things. It bothers my stomach.
Yeah. Oh, Barry, thank you so much for being here. This has been an interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I do have the links down below to your website where people can hire you for your services. Also to your course where you review cases at ngb400.com, and a link to the trailer that we watched earlier on of your 6-part series. Is it 5-part series or 6-part series? 5-part.
It's
5-part series.
4-part.
Oh, it's 4-part. Oh, it's a 4-part series. Okay, 4-part series that is going to end up making you the next big politician in the United States. That's surely going to result in it. So, Barry, thank you so much again for being here. Such a fascinating conversation.
Kim, it was my pleasure.
Thank you. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.